Hi, I'm Susan Vanderhoff, the Outreach Social Worker at Maryland School for the Blind, and I'm here with three other coworkers to talk about self-care for families during COVID-19. I'm here with Allison Bethea, who is a psychologist and the admissions coordinator in Outreach, with Renee Kirby, who is the parent coordinator, and Sharon Whited, who is the low vision specialist. And some of you may have worked with all of us at one point or another. So I'm going to start with self-care for parents. Why is taking care of yourself when so much is going on right now just as important as taking care of your family? Next slide, please. You know, there's a reason why airline attendants tell us to put our own oxygen mask on first. When I first heard that, I felt like that would be the most selfish thing to do. But the reality is that if you're passed out over the guy next to you, you're just not going to be able to help, and you may even make things worse. So in these times when so much has changed and so much is uncertain, how do we help ourselves and also our family to feel strong and safe? There are important ways that help us to do that in everyday life and are especially important right now with the changes and the uncertainty. One of those is structure, and structure adds predictability and stability, offers us the choices that we can make right now to support our well-being. Connection is more important than ever. Our brains and bodies need that communication, that closeness. How do you get it when you're in quarantine? And movement. Our bodies are made to move, especially when we're stressed. When we don't move, we hold that trauma, we hold that stress within our body, and it can keep us from sleeping. It can make us feel very anxious. It just is not healthy. So what can we do about these things? So just moving on, please. Feeling strong and safe. It's normal to feel overwhelmed during a pandemic. When I say that sentence, you think, of course, it's normal to feel overwhelmed. But I see a lot of parents who are not cutting themselves any slack. They're doing things that they've never done before, like homeschool, being with their household 24/7, things that are just very difficult to manage. Their usual ways of taking care of themselves may not be available right now. So giving yourself a break is really helpful. It may not be impossible, although it seems to be, to find some time for yourself, but it may be very difficult. I can tell you the way some other parents have managed. I have one mom who regularly now meets me in her car by Starbucks. I'm working with everyone remotely right now. So she's got her phone. We make our connection. Sometimes she is able to find some internet, and we can use a HIPAA platform that I have on Zoom. Sometimes we use FaceTime because all she's got available is her phone, and we just figure it out. But she needs that time out of her home. She needs that time away from her household. She's got 4 boys, and so she just figures out how to get an hour to herself. The oldest one has access to her through text, and she just connects everybody up with an activity that will hold them for a bit. So finding a little time to yourself to do something that takes care of you is more important than ever. What you say to yourself matters. Your thoughts establish your well-being, and you can nurture yourself with true and reassuring thoughts. If you latch on to that worst case scenario and convince yourself that that's your future, you're doing a couple of things that will make you feel just awful. And those awful, awful feelings may be a cue for you that you're saying something that's not true and not fair and will cause a lot of distress. So just notice when you start to panic, whatever those body sensations or those thoughts are for you, just notice without judging, without needing to tell yourself a story about them. And then think, am I catastrophizing? Am I taking that small worst case scenario and convincing myself that that 4% chance is a 100% chance, or is even a 90 or a 75% chance, when really it's a 4 or maybe a 10% chance. How much better it would feel to be able to tell yourself, there is a great likelihood that I will not get sick, that my children will not get sick, and there is a greater likelihood that if we do, our symptoms will be minor and that we will recover, that I am safe. Couple that with a deep inhale, a slow exhale, maybe a few of those, and you might be able to manage the anxiety. Maybe even a more extensive mindfulness strategy. For example, just start to notice the space you're in right now. Look around and notice 3 things in a way that's different to you, that brings you into your present. Notice where your body is touching the chair, where your feet are touching the floor, and mindfully deepen your inhale and slow your exhale. Our breath is part of our autonomic nervous system. When we become anxious or stressed, our heart starts to beat very fast, our breath gets quick and shallow, and it's the one, and we move into fight or flight. It's very hard to stay in reality, very hard to stay with a true reassuring thought. So before you start to practice that information, finding that true reassuring thing that supports your well-being, you may have to settle yourself down a bit, get yourself grounded in your present. Deep inhale, slow exhale, a few of those. Notice where your body is touching the floor, is touching the seat. Notice what's around you. Notice that you're safe in this moment. And tell yourself that. It's important to limit the amount of news that you listen to, and also consider your child's developmental ability to process anxiety if they are nearby. We are not made, our bodies are not built, our minds are not made to process all of the terrible things that happen all over the world. Keep it manageable. Notice if listening to the news right before you go to bed keeps you awake. Mind the social media that you allow yourself access to. It's distressing, and you're not really helping the situation when you're passed out over the guy next to you. You need to keep your own self grounded and then decide how you're going to move in the world and how you're going to take care of your family. So moving on, please. So many important things have changed, and there's so much uncertainty in our current situation. But you still have a lot of choices in how you deal with this predicament in which we've all found ourselves that will impact your sense of well-being. Having a schedule, and I'm not going to say too much about that because although it is really important, Renee is going to talk more about finding a nice schedule that works for you and your children. It's important to fill your days with activities that support your well-being, and it provides you and your family with things to look forward to. Schedules for getting schoolwork done and getting your work done, and it will probably need to be flexible. You need extra time to take care of yourself, and if you're juggling work and children, you're not going to get as much done as you typically would. You're just not. But having some things to look forward to. A cozy bedtime routine, meal times together, outside time, time in nature, times when you visit, times to exercise. Moving is number 1 for stress management. Family time, games, some of those will need to be remotely with grandparents or friends or other people. School time, project time. This is a time when a lot of people are finding crafts or baking projects, things they've wanted to do but haven't been stuck in their homes long enough to actually develop them. Well, here we are. So you can learn to make pizza, homemade pizza, like you've always wanted to do, or learn to knit. You and your kids can learn to play chess. This is the time to find some things to do together. Because we still need that connection, just the way we always have. Could we move on, please, Allison? Our brains and our bodies are hardwired to connect to others. So how does this happen in quarantine? Well, sometimes it can happen remotely. Some of the things I used to enjoy doing are no longer available to me. I used to like to have folks over for dinner. We would have a glass of wine while I cook and chat and play music, and I really enjoyed it. Now, I ask a friend if they want to Zoom for a while, and I prop them up in front of my kitchen, and we cook while we talk, and it's fun to do. There are online game forums that we can be part of. I've played Trivial Pursuit and Pictionary and something about humanity, Cards Against Humanity. All of those are figure-outable on computers. People have sing-alongs and family celebrations and library programs in addition to school on platforms. They also work out some creative ways for feeling connected and still staying safe. Children have told me about playing driveway kickball, where they're in their driveway, their neighbors are in their driveway, and they're kicking a ball back and forth, and it's just fun to have that connection. One family told me about an Easter celebration where grandparents sat on the other side of the driveway. They sat in their yard and they had Easter dinner together, and the grandparents got to watch the kids look for Easter eggs. Where I hike, I have seen people sitting in their car, outside their cars, with their own picnic snacks, talking and having fun. They have been meeting like that for years and have continued to figure out how to do that. I do an online yoga program several times a week. People have sing-alongs. They dance together. We have to figure out a way to stay connected, because we need to do that, and it's going to add to our stress if we become very isolated. Touch and hug any quarantine buddies you're lucky enough to have, because they need the connection too. And finally, our bodies are made to move. It's the #1 stress buster. Stress and trauma. We can move along a different slide, please, Allison. Stress and trauma are held in the body. Moving improves sleep. Moving with others in some of the ways that I mentioned, maybe safe distance walking, helps us feel connected and also processes stress. Outdoor exercise soothes the body and the mind. I'm seeing a lot more people biking these days. A lot of families biking, walking, gardening, other yard work, water sprinklers, sidewalk chalk, hula hoops, basketball, kickball, driveway games. You can go online and just find all kinds of old-fashioned and new-fashioned things to do. One of the things I mentioned as one of the most important ways to provide stability and a feeling of safety, predictability, is developing a routine and helping your child manage with their schoolwork. So Dr. Bethea is going to talk about managing behavior and other issues that come up during home learning time. Allison?
Thanks, Susan. Appreciate it. Welcome again, everybody. I'm just going to take a minute to queue up my part of the presentation, so just bear with me. Okay, can you hear me okay? All right. So as Susan indicated, I'm going to talk a little bit about um, issues related to behavior management for learning situations that occur at home. Because as Susan alluded to, these are challenging and different times for all parents who are now kind of thrust unexpectedly into the position of having to educate and teach your kids at home and also manage all the other day-to-day responsibilities. So it's not easy. So in thinking about learning and instructional situations at home, one of the metaphors that came to me was this notion of setting a table for success. So just kind of envisioning a table, and there's three components to our table. So what we want to think about is especially the foundation or the base of our table, because without that, our table is going to be wobbly and not stable. So we want to establish reasonable expectations for home instruction. So that is a very key component to this. And that's not only what we're expecting of our children, but what we're expecting of ourselves as parents, being in the role suddenly of teacher and instructor. So we have to have realistic expectations for ourselves to avoid experiencing overload or getting too stressed. And then we want to have an understanding of what our child brings to the table as a learner and a student. So this relates to characteristics of each individual child and situation. So that's going to vary and be different from family to family. And then we'll talk a bit about the importance of not only specific behavior management strategies, but the importance of consistently implementing those. Okay, so as far as establishing reasonable expectations, a quote that I've seen a lot in social media and in the news, kind of describing the fact that we are all, as a society and essentially as an entire planet, faced with the challenge of coping with the global pandemic, a global health crisis. So I've heard and read people refer to the situation as we are all in the same storm, meaning the pandemic, but we're in different boats. And that refers to the fact that each of us is in our own situation. So each situation in terms of the challenges and what each family is coping with is going to vary. So we all have to be mindful of each other's own individual situation as families and not compare ourselves to other families and how they're coping and the challenges that they're facing with. So that's going to vary and be different. So part of having reasonable expectations is just knowing what our situation is and not feeling guilty or not feeling down or poorly about ourselves because we're not meeting things in the same way as some other family. Okay. So another kind of nice idea to consider in thinking about establishing reasonable expectations, and this is part of knowing and understanding where we are as individuals and families in terms of the challenges that the pandemic is throwing at us and what we're having to cope with and deal with. So this slide just depicts Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Abraham Maslow is a psychologist, and he is most known for the graphic here, which depicts that hierarchy of needs. So the point of it is you want to consider the lower level needs or the needs at the bottom of the hierarchy, and you have to have those needs met before you can advance up to the top of the hierarchy. So it's important that we all have adequate food, water, health, and health these days is definitely under threat for each of us because of the pandemic, and that's a source of anxiety. So without those physiological needs met, it's hard to then move up and consider other needs and focus on things like employment or other aspects of security, focusing on just the physical status of your home and being able to focus on keeping things organized or clean. So if you're not healthy, you're not well fed, it's hard to concentrate on those important aspects of safety. And then moving up, if you can't concentrate on or meet your safety needs, so if you happen to be sick or you happen to lose your job or not have access to other safety resources, it's hard then to be available to engage in emotionally supporting others or engaging in friendships. And then without those things, in terms of intimacy or social interaction, the lack of those needs being met can affect how we feel about ourselves in terms of self-esteem and confidence. We're kind of moving up the hierarchy again. And then at the very top, without all those needs below being met, it is hard to engage in kind of states that involve what we term self-actualization, which just means those very higher order aspects of being human that contribute to overall quality of life and wellness. So things like creativity, being able to think about morality and what's good and what's bad in terms of ourselves as individuals and for society as a whole. Okay. And the same hierarchy, we can apply that to the needs of children. So it's important to understand that if kids aren't, if kids are hungry or if they're thirsty, if other basic physiological needs aren't met, they're not in a good position to be students or learners. If their safety needs aren't adequately met, they're not going to be in a good position to be learners. And we know that with the pandemic, a lot of our children are aware enough to understand that there is some crisis and there's some threat, but they're not able to process that in the same way that an adult can. So they can kind of experience an overwhelming sense of anxiety that's going to interfere with their ability to learn. And we know the pandemic is limiting, because of the needs for social distancing, limiting social interaction, excuse me, for our kids. And that's important to children. So when kids can't be around their friends and play and engage in their usual social routines, that's going to affect their emotional state and lead to potentially increased anxiety, feelings of sadness, or perhaps on a more serious level, depression. So we have to be mindful of that. So if those needs aren't met, again, that's something that can interfere with learning. And then thinking more about what each child brings to the table as learners, we know each child is an individual, and each of our kids has their own specific needs and perhaps challenges as students and learners. And I won't touch on each of these individually, but it's just important to keep in mind that any challenge that a child has that causes them difficulty to learn or pay attention, focus on what they need to do. The stress of the pandemic and this new normal that we're all coping with and changes in their routine, it can cause all of those usual educational challenges to be worse. So you can expect that your child may not function at home as efficiently as a learner, as a student, as they do when they're in school. So keep that in mind. Other behaviors will increase for a lot of kids when they're under stress. So if you have a child that occasionally experiences what we term meltdowns or anxiety or a temper tantrum because of added stress and added challenges as far as coping, those types of behaviors can increase in frequency and intensity. And then we know, because of all the stresses involved, that kids who have very few pre-existing behavior concerns, they may begin to demonstrate some new behaviors in response to stress that they're experiencing or even observing within the home setting. So we have to keep that in mind as we're thinking about what we're expecting of our kids right now. A good thing to consider in any teaching situation is, what are the strengths that can be capitalized upon and built upon to build self-esteem and confidence in our kids as we're teaching them at home. So you can kind of focus on those things and allow the child to experience success and maybe build in some of those activities over the course of the day. So you alternate the activities where they're strong and show their best abilities in so they can feel good about themselves, and then switch to an activity that is a bit more challenging. And then we know a lot of students, especially students who have developmental challenges, they have, even in the best circumstances, difficulty bringing a skill that they learn in school and then demonstrating that in the home environment. So because home is different than the setting where they originally learned the skill, we know sometimes those skills don't generalize to the home environment. So we have to kind of think about that, and if kids aren't showing at home what they have demonstrated in school, it may be just an artifact of this is a different setting where we're expecting them to demonstrate this. So keep that in mind as well. And then some more specific ideas for actual behavior management. And the key is to, you want to try something, and don't be afraid to try different things, but you want to try to find something that is effective and works, and then implement that consistently. And a lot of what effective behavior management is we're trying to anticipate and minimize what we term the antecedents, or the triggers for the challenging behaviors. So for example, we talked about the physiological needs have to be met before our student is ready to learn. So you want to make sure that they're not hungry or thirsty prior to any home instruction. We know students working in the home setting, they may need more frequent breaks, and you may need to reduce the length of instructional sessions. And you might have to experiment with this a little bit, and that's okay, but then you can kind of find what works and kind of stick to that. And that's an area where our students, either their continuity of learning plan around home instruction that was developed in conjunction with child's educational providers, or their IEP, can provide some guidance. But the frequency of the breaks and the length of instructional sessions may need to be even more frequent in terms of breaks, or shorter instructional sessions than what is typical for your student in their classroom at school. We already talked a little bit about alternating more demanding with less demanding activities. And another nice thing to try is to, when possible, give your child a choice in how instruction time will be organized. So let them have some investment and let them have some buy-in in terms of what the day and what the plan is going to look like. And also help define for your student when a task is going to be finished. So letting kids know how much more of a particular thing they need to do before they reach the end can kind of help give them a little more structure and make learning sessions seem more bearable. Students at these times, because again of stress and coping challenges, may need increased opportunities for practice and repetition at home in order to demonstrate a skill. So you may have to allow for that. And then for behavior, you want to establish with your student, if you can, have them kind of contribute to that, but if they're able, but you want to have a small number of rules and explain what behavior you expect as you enter an instructional situation at home with your child. And you can also consider offering appropriate rewards or reinforcers after completing a task. And the important thing is to make sure whatever that reward is, that you implement or give the reward as soon as the activity is over, because that is what makes a reinforcer most effective. And this is an area where the student's teacher is probably going to have some helpful suggestions. And if your child has used some behavior reinforcement schedules in the classroom at school, the teacher can help come up with ways to implement those same strategies at home. Then there's some other types of reinforcement systems that are worth mentioning. A first-then chart, something called the I'm working for chart, and then point systems that incorporate tallying. And the next slide just gives some pictorial examples of those. So obviously a key for our students who are blind or vision impaired is to come up with ways to represent this so it's meaningful to them. So whether that's done tactily through Braille, or making sure the print is large enough. So we have to accommodate those things. I'm working for, the example on the right, the student has chosen time on the iPad, and for each component of an activity, they earn a star if it's completed in a satisfactory way. And then when they get the sufficient number of stars, then they get some iPad time. And then this is just a simple tally system. It doesn't have to be fancy. And this tallying is something that can be done pretty easy tactily. So it's common to use like beads on a string, or you move the beads over, or you can have some concrete thing like a poker chip, and you get so many chips in your pile, and then you get your reward. And then the last photo just shows a more concrete tally system using strips of paper. Okay. And that is all I have. So our next presenter is going to be Renee Kirby, and I am going to queue up her presentation. So just give me a second. And that.
Maybe I'll just introduce myself while I'm waiting.
Yeah.
I'm Renee Kirby. I'm the parent coordinator at Maryland School for the Blind. And I'm going to be discussing, and I'm going to be switching my glasses because one is for reading. I still need to go to the eye doctor to get the bifocals. I've been putting that off. So I'm just going to be switching here. I'm going to be discussing some ideas for possible strategies for organization. I know this has been a struggle just for the distance learning piece and also working from home full time. I feel like it's taken almost this long to establish a routine, but I feel like, this might help depending on what we're going to face in the fall as far as distance learning. And some people may still be working from home part-time or, just kind of juggling all that. I'm going to touch on some ideas for building a flexible schedule, like Allison was just discussing. And I'm going to really emphasize flexible because I want you to understand that we're not teachers, we're parents. And, some of us are teachers too, but, we weren't really expecting this. And please don't be too hard on yourself. If things kind of go awry, the dogs run through a mud puddle in the morning and you're having to deal with that mess or whatever's happening in your house, know that you can always go back to it. That's the great thing, working from home and teaching from home. You don't need to stick to a strict schedule every single day, and just allow that wiggle room a little bit. So we're going to talk about also creating a work area that maybe can be mobile, and also keeping lines of communication open with your child's teachers is critical, and really encouraging independent learning, just so we can kind of walk away sometimes. Maybe we have a meeting to be in, or, it always isn't easy when my son has his classwork and also I have a meeting going on. Sometimes we have to work right next to each other and be very quiet or mute ourselves, or, it's a dance that we're doing here. So how organization and planning can reduce stress. Understanding and realizing it's okay to veer off from the school schedule that you've created for and with your child. And again, that's also very important, in involving your child with that as much as possible. Next slide, please. So Allison showed some of the schedules that she had, first and then. I think that, I got these schedules off of Pinterest, which is a really great resource. And, they're pretty basic. You can kind of turn them into, tactile. You can put some objects, if you have ways of doing that at home that your child can identify with. If at all possible, involve your child with developing a day-to-day schedule. Your child's needs and understanding dictate the complexity and the style of this chart. So I have two different ideas here. Whatever works for you. Just kind of see what's out there, create your own very basic one. It's difficult for anyone to sit in one place for 30 minutes, so make sure that you are incorporating some other activities, some breaks, and you and your child can determine maybe what those breaks are. My son, on nice days, likes to go out and ride his bike, and he will sit down at the computer, and most of the time it's for about 20 minutes, and he finishes his assignment, and one of his assignments for the day, and he'll look at me and say, "Mom, can I go ride my bike?" And I'm very flexible with that because I've seen that he's really put his all into what he's been doing, and he'll go out and ride his bike. So whatever your child likes to do, depending on the abilities and the age and interests, we have to take those into account. I think it's really great to be able to give them a break before starting something else that they have to sit still for. We do not need to reinvent the wheel, so that's why I said Pinterest is a great resource. Just go and print something off if you can, as much as possible, so we don't have to make this more difficult than it has to be. Routines provide structure and a sense of security and help children develop self-discipline. They also help us appropriately self-regulate and control our environments in this very uncontrollable kind of time right now. We had no idea that this was happening, and I think a lot of kids feel like they need some control, and involving them in this schedule ideas and break ideas are a really good idea. So next slide, please. So this is just an idea. This is just suggestions for creating a mobile workstation, just because I know that it helps to be able to pick up everything and move to another spot in my house. I have 2 kids that were taking college courses. They're finished with their courses now, and my son is in 5th grade. So, you know, and it also helps to have different areas of the house to be able to work in, and not always the same area. I think it gets kind of old. You know, our kids in school get to travel from classroom to classroom, have a variety of something to stimulate them to want to be able to learn. So I thought these ideas of having labeled grab-and-go bags. If your child has a lot of tactile objects they work with, this would come in handy. Or like my son has some papers that we printed off for school, although he's doing most of his learning through Google Classroom. We put some folders and his papers in different bags that are labeled, so he can just grab it and move to sometimes he does his work on the front porch. You know, we live off the road, so it's a little bit quiet at our house. Another thing that can help is a rolling cart. If you have one at home, no, you know, I'm not suggesting go out and buying these things unless you feel it's necessary. But I did put that Michael's and also Amazon have these things to purchase. Milk crates. We have a lot of milk crates at our house. I used them in college to support my stereo system, and they're pretty old. And, you know, they're really great for hanging files. So, you know, even for working from home, I think these come in handy. And the next slide, it just shows some pictures of these items. Next slide, please. So creating and keeping open communication with your child's teacher. I think this is critical. You know, when this all started, everybody was, at least I know I was, in panic mode, and some of the other mothers that I'm friends with were also in some sort of a panic mode, like, how am I going to do this? I didn't want to homeschool my child. I think having that connection with your child's teacher really helps settle those fears and that anxiety. Determine what mode of communication, either email, text, phone calls, is the best way for you and your child's classroom teachers and other staff that work with your child to connect. This has been such a stress reducer throughout, you know, and I think it's also important after the initial contact with your child's teacher to make sure you also reach out as soon as complications or issues arise. Most things can be addressed fairly simply if they're caught early on, instead of letting them get huge and crazy. And, you know, I think anything's going to be fixable. But we're all kind of learning this together. Even your child's teacher, you know, wasn't thinking that this was going to be their way of teaching when they graduated from college, or, you know, even had been teaching for 10 years or more. This is all kind of new to all of us. And remember that the school staff cannot read your mind and really want to know how your child and you are accommodating and coping with the distance learning. When in doubt, reach out. I think that's, no question is going to be a stupid question. If it involves your child and or your concerns, your child's teacher wants to hear about it. Next slide, please. And these are just some helpful tips for encouraging independent learning and focus. This is also, my son doesn't really have any apparent disabilities, but I know that he is easily distracted. And we have a lot going on in my house. It's a small house. We have 2 very large dogs that they're fairly good, but they, you know, get into trouble and they need attention. I'm constantly being pulled away either for work or for something that's going on in the house. I think that it's great to be able to build those flexible routines, and know that you can always kind of fall back on, okay, now what do we do now? Let me look at our schedule, or I write my schedule actually down on a blackboard in our kitchen so I can see it. It's basically for me to know. I can go back to that and say, okay, now what were we doing before we had to go out and catch the dogs from running after the mailman? Most of us need structure to function healthily. Discuss with your child what the days are going to look like and what expectations will be in terms of tasks such as schoolwork, chores, reading, outdoor play, technology, etc. It's important to consider your child's input for this. So I really liked Allison's chart that she used. So, you get 5 stars and you can actually get the prize. So I definitely can relate to the iPad because that is also one of the things that my son likes to use for play. So, whatever motivates your child, just saying, let's stay focused here. We'll take a break in 20 minutes. We'll come back and work. And every time that they're working towards their goal, they get the star and they finally do get the prize. Work breaks into your daily schedule for active play. Adventure into nature, which is also something that Susan talked about. And by going on walks or hikes on a nice day, or simply just sitting in your yard, letting kids play outside, or just eating in the backyard. Fresh air and physical activity are crucial during this time of isolation. I really feel like it's important to make sure that you are being active, your child is being active, getting fresh air, taking those deep inhales. I think all of that really helps with focus and being ready to tackle the next, meeting or whatever is on the schedule. Stay connected with the outside world, your community and family and friends and classmates. Schedule time each week for your child to virtually be in touch. So my son's teacher actually does this already, and I think it is such an amazing thing. She did it, I think they started the 2nd or 3rd week into this whole distance learning. And at first he refused to. And I don't, you just don't really know what's going on in your child's brain, the fear that they have about being on camera or the unknown or whatever's happening. But we talked about it. He missed, I think, 1 or 2 of them. The one that he joined, the first one that he joined, I said, turn the camera off, if you don't want to be on camera. But then he saw all his friends on the camera. And midway through, he turned the camera on and he ran inside and got his hat so he can look like he was having fun, and a hat that he had made. And so he got on camera with his hat on and he, after that, really looked forward to it. And he would tell me, Mom, I have a meeting at 10 o'clock on Wednesdays. So, I think that that is awesome if your child's teacher is doing something like that. But you can also encourage your child to reach out to grandma or grandpop or a cousin or a friend. My son actually did some FaceTime with his classmate this week. And it was just, we had to kind of take the phone away because it was going on forever. But, they really miss each other. And I think that connection is so very important. The other idea that I thought was, I was reading about all these different ways of helping kids during this isolation, writing letters. We're all kind of going back to the old ways of doing things and, making dinner every night, sitting down with the family. We have something, my son has Would You Rather, and he presents this at every dinner that we have. And it's just, we're making memories right now. And I think that is just really important. And know that your schedule is just something to have, to use, when you can stick to it. I think it's great. When you feel like it's just not going to work, that's great too. And whatever is going to work for you and your family, the dynamics in your house and I just think that you'll make it work. And I think we'll be better prepared for the fall if we have any sort of distance learning then. The next slide, I don't know if we have time for, we probably don't, but it's just a little clip from it's a psychologist at Hopkins, and she's basically just discussing everything that we've discussed here. So if you could go to the next slide, Allison, maybe they could just look at the link, and if you're interested in getting onto that link.
For some reason, it's not letting me advance.
Okay. Well, that's okay. You know, like I said, it's reiterating everything that we've discussed up until now, and also what Sharon's going to be talking about. So I think that I'm going to introduce. Do you think you can take that off of there?
I am going to queue up our next presenter's presentation, and hopefully we won't have any additional technical issues. So
this is going to be Sharon Whitehead. She's our low vision specialist, and she's going to be talking about finding balanced in an unbalanced time. Is that correct, Sharon? You're muted.
Yes, you're right. You're right, Renee. Yes, creating balance and an unbalanced time. I have to thank Renee for coming up with this title.
give me 1 second, Sharon.
Hey, no problem.
I tell my clients that dealing with technology glitches is just part of everyday life these days.
Yep.
It is a challenge.
It's part of every job.
Yep.
Okay, so let me switch back here. Share there.
And here we go.
Oops. Okay, Sharon, let me just make sure I can advance through these, okay?
And yes, you can. Okay, and if you want to keep it at that slide, that's good.
All right.
This is perfect.
All
Yeah,
right.
that's it. You got it. Okay, the majority of this presentation is from a podcast titled How to Parent in a Pandemic, a conversation with Pamela Cantor, MD. Dr. Cantor is the founder and senior science advisor for Turnaround for Children. Turnaround for Children is an organization that provides support to educators to address the impact of stress and trauma on children's learning and development. Turnaround for Children was founded in the wake of the 9/11 attacks to address the impact of trauma on New York City public school students. Dr. Cantor starts her podcast saying, "The primary task that we face is how we will manage the stress that this experience is causing. There is nothing more powerful than a deeply felt human relationship in driving stress down and driving all kinds of other skills and capabilities up. So teachers, leaders, and parents need to create opportunities for safety and a feeling of belonging, even with physical distancing now and when we go back to school. Stress is not always bad, and mild and moderate levels of stress help us prepare for a challenge. Stress releases a hormone that creates that flight, fight, or freeze feeling that helps us prepare. This is normal. But high levels of stress that is not buffered by a trusting adult relationship can affect the parts of the brain that are involved with focus, attention, and emotion. Relationships that are strong and positive actually trigger the release of another hormone and enables the child to manage stress and build the muscle of resiliency. Dr. Cantor's presentation emphasized the importance of what she calls the 3 R's: relationships, routines, and resiliency. A lot of the characteristics under them you've already heard about. And she goes on to explain their importance in managing stress. The brain is a dynamic living structure and most susceptible to change from experience than any tissue in the human body due to its astounding ability to build new pathways. Environments, experience, and relationships drive the development of the brain. Fuel for the brain development is the effective relationships. Routines help support brain development, and the end goal is resiliency, a tremendously important skill. We've already heard that mental health status impacts decision-making and physical health, and the requirement to be safe from the virus disrupts the community that we need for social emotional health. Some of these suggestions have already been presented. Things like increasing participation in family routines, planning a meal, learning how to cook. All kinds of projects can be created around meals. Meals can be eaten in different rooms. I've seen blogs of children making tents for meals. A lot of creativity, and everyone can be involved in planning. Down the street from where I live in a small community, and they have opened up their pop-up camper, and the children are using that as an alternative space for activities. Other ideas are home improvement projects. They provided opportunity for the kids to exercise, to be creative, as well as connect with the family as a whole. We've already heard about how important it is to maintain connection and a sense of community, and also the connection with the teacher. I was taking a walk one evening, and there were 3 boys who were on bikes. They looked to be about middle school, and one of the boys asked if he could walk with me, and I said, sure. And so we started walking, and I started talking to him about the school experience and the schooling, and and how it was working for him, kind of what was working. And I asked him, I said, if you can change something, is there something that you're missing? And I actually told him about this project that we were working on, and he said, I miss my teacher. I miss being able to talk to my teacher. So that just illustrated and reinforced to me how important it is, that relationship with his teacher. I am part of a community, but I have enjoyed being able to get to know some of the children and people in my neighborhood more than I knew them when I was working and leaving my house to work rather than working from home. It was funny, yesterday I was on my way back from a walk, and the little boy that lives across the street, he is going to be in the 5th grade next year, was very proud. He had just gotten new shoes and wanted to make sure, he told me twice and showed me his new shoes two times. So I feel like our community has enlarged itself a bit, but also become more supportive, more, I wanted to use the word intense, but I don't know if that's the right word, but deeper than what it was at one time. There's been an increase in screen time since the pandemic, but rather than set limits on how much screen time as it is used for instruction and social networking, the American Academy of Pediatrics published a statement that urged parents to preserve offline experiences. The lack of time limits was deliberate to prevent parents from feeling like they are not meeting some sort of standard. Instead of focusing on how much time your child spends in front of a screen, it might be better to approach their media use in terms of who they are, what they're watching, and how you're interacting with them. One article I read, it was written by a man named Dr. Radesky, and he talked about the 3 C's framework. 3 C's being child, content, and context. As we heard Renee say, you know your child and are the best person to decide what and how much media is the right amount. Some suggestions he had was to build on the child's strengths or the child's interest. If your child likes music, find programming that incorporates singing like a musical that you can listen to and perform together. Quality matters more than quantity of time. Try and prioritize content developed by reputable sources, such as live cameras like those being offered by zoos, museums, and for travel, and video games that include interaction with other children. Engage with the kids during screen time, taking an interest in what they are doing. Connect with what they are doing on media with real-world experiences and discuss what your child is learning. It is recommended that screen time be avoided an hour or two before bedtime. Other suggestions are to work on an assignment or a task together. Spending time with your child at home lets you see the challenges your child faces with learning. As much as possible, use strategies that are fun, and including your child and the suggestions are including your child in topics to complete writing assignments, using strategies such as jokes and word games when learning vocabulary, making learning fun. You may notice that there are some personal skills that you will now have the time to work on since you're both home. Focus on one skill at a time. Identify strategies to help your child learn the new skill with input from the child. One of the things I notice when I work with kids in face-to-face situations, one of the things I ask them is, how do you learn best? And I am amazed that very young children already know what they need in order to be the best that they can be. We've already talked about some charts. It might be helpful to use some charts with pictures. And if technology is available, you can use steps for completing skills through technology, like by making a book through PowerPoint. We've already heard a lot about the outdoor activities. And no matter your age or fitness level, you can learn to use exercise as a powerful tool to feel better. The sense of being pent up can translate into more anxiety and feeling more ramped up. Identify with your child exercises and activities you can all do together. Okay, what you have listed are 5 benefits to the brain of routines, and I'm not going to go through them. But what Pam Cantor was very clear about is that when you're talking about routines, you were really talking about the brain. The brain loves order. It loves to be able to predict what is happening next. Renee talked a lot about creating routines and creating daily plans for the day. In those plans for the day, you can include the chores, the school day, but don't forget to include fun times, parts of the day when you can all be together. Chart your successes and accomplishments. The routines help take an unpredictable part of our day and turn it into something that is predictable. And she also emphasizes the very importance of including the child in the development of the routine. We must have activities that give us hope and that we can have fun doing. There is no one way to plan a daily schedule that works for everyone. Follow your child. Children know themselves what works for them. Identify pleasurable activities with your child and follow their lead for the need for breaks and times of attention. Provide strategies for success and help them. Oh, it's the next one actually, Allison. Provide strategies for success and help them identify settings, materials, and accommodations that will help them to attend and be successful, whether it is an activity for school or for leisure. Include opportunities for your child to talk about anything they want to talk about. It may be helpful for some children to have a "How am I feeling" chart. There are a lot of charts online that could be helpful. Create activities that your child can look forward to. Don't expect or put pressure on your child that the level of instruction or attention will be the same as it was in school. And that's the next slide. The reality is the days are hard right now for everyone. Kids might not have access to the necessary technology. They may be caring for younger siblings. They might not have support from busy parents who are also trying to work from home. In these circumstances, trying to replicate a traditional school schedule online may be impossible. A child spending 1 to 2 hours a day on schoolwork is not just learning for 1 to 2 hours a day. Kids learn through play. They learn through talking with their families, participating in activities with their friends, and they learn through simply existing through this global pandemic. Dr. Cantor suggests it's time to honor those experiences, ease up on ourselves, and try not to mimic school exactly. We're learning differently these days, and that's okay. Resiliency is an amazing quality in humans. Dr. Cantor describes it as a muscle that can be built and is built by challenges. We need to do everything we can to create an environment of safety and security that says we can cope and believe that we can surmount this difficulty. No one builds resiliency by themselves, but through connection with others. To help support the development of resiliency, we need to build foundational skills. We heard Susan talk about regulation of thought, behavior, and emotion. Following the modeling of another person and helping us deal with the feelings we have, this is the fundamental building block. She's already talked about suggestions such as reflective practices like meditation, yoga, and journaling, and avoiding or limiting media. Paying attention to your physical and emotional wellness. Mental health status impacts decision-making and your physical health. How well our children do will depend on how well the parents are doing. Children can only be supported if the adults in their lives are supported. Believe that we will get through this. So, how do you live a balanced life during an imbalanced time? Danelle Chapman from Counseling and Mindful Movement says go slow. But building in a few minutes of slow time every day feeds your nervous system and your soul. Reflect regularly. Reflection helps connect us with our deeper purpose and with those with whom we share our lives. Practice forgiveness. Go easy on yourself and others, and remember that grudges and judgment prevent us from experiencing an expansive life. Start small. Choose one new mindset or behavior to try for a month and take note of how it feels and the changes that ensue. Begin again. If today was not one of balance, tomorrow we always have the opportunity to start over.
Okay, so that
Did you want to say something, Susan?
concludes our presentation. Susan, I'll let you take it from here.
Oh, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciated your presence. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. And we hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Please feel free to contact us if you have additional questions about what we discussed today. Renee, as our parent coordinator, is a good point of contact.
Is there a contact information, Renee?
One way you can contact me is by joining, if you're on Facebook, the Maryland School for the Blind Parent Group is on Facebook. So if you ask to join, I will approve your membership to join, and we can discuss anything that you'd like to discuss about your student, any questions that you have. And I think my contact is also on our website. So,
and that's a great way to find out about anything we're doing.
Yeah, definitely. Check out our website.
All right.
Okay.
Thank
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.